Fabian, you're here.
I am.
Yeah. Thanks so much for coming on, man.
No problem. Happy to be here.
Yeah, we were really excited to meet you the other day and hear something about the work that you're doing. I hope we can pick your brain about it a bunch more.
Sure.
Can you just tell us a little bit about your background, particularly your academic background?
Sure. Yeah. So I went to George Mason University up in Fairfax, Virginia, little town outside of DC, and studied earth science and got my bachelor's degree there, and decided that I wanted to do some more school. And
More earth science.
I know more earth science. And so I went down to a little town, North Carolina called Wilmington, little town on the coast, and studied geoscience, which is another form of earth science.
Yeah.
And you can kind of rope that into geology as well. Earth
Okay.
science is broken out into other smaller sciences. So within the earth science field, you have geology, you also have astronomy, you also have oceanography, and you also have meteorology.
Okay.
So I like to look at it as earth science. It's really just the study of the earth
Hmm.
and figuring out how it works.
Yeah.
So that's what I did. I went down to Wilmington, and then found kind of my niche of really focusing in on coastal geology.
Coastal geology.
Hmm.
Okay. Gotcha. Yeah, you were saying that you build beaches.
Yes.
Okay, so what break that down for us a little bit.
Sure. So I'm not the one that is driving the machinery to move sand
Mm,
to construct the beach.
yeah.
Purely my job as a geologist is to investigate where we can find sand offshore to then pump on the beach. So
Okay.
we have here or on the East Coast,
Mm,
a lot of our shorelines are eroding very, very fast
mm,
from sea level rise, from frequent hurricanes and nor'easters that come up the coast that are moving sand offshore.
mm.
And then how does it get back? Well, that's where we come in to help put it back on the beach.
That's cool. Yeah, yeah. Your sand harvesters.
Exactly.
Wow.
Yeah.
So all right. So nor'easters, hurricanes, these are somewhat natural processes, of
Hmm.
course. Some people would argue that there's human influence on those, but we'll leave that for later. Um, so what if left unchecked, what would gradually happen over time to the coast of? I mean, are we talking all the way from Florida all the way up to Maine and Canada?
So there, each coastline has its own, erosion rate or what we call accretion rate, which is adding of sediment. Erosion is removing of sediment, removing the beach.
Okay.
So every beach on the East Coast has its own. What you could have areas of the coast that are accreting, they're gaining sand, and areas of
Mm,
the coast where, they're not, they're losing sand.
mm,
And so North Carolina, a lot of our beaches are eroding. If you just Google Outer Banks house falling into the ocean, you'll find real quick of these houses where nourishment projects aren't happening, and the houses literally were once back off the beach are now literally in the water and then tumble into the sea. So that happens, and Mother Nature is a difficult thing to deal with,
yeah.
and it's inevitable that sea levels rising.
Mm,
We've been seeing that over the last 10,000 years
mm.
of the sea level rising, not being influenced by man, but it's something that is inevitable. We have, and what causes that is the melting of glaciers.
Okay.
So glaciers cause an influx of water into the ocean and ultimately elevate the the oceans to come up.
Right.
One class that I took in college, he gave a trick question to us. He asked us, if you were to melt all the sea ice in the entire world, how much would sea level rise? And
Mm,
everyone puts, oh, 100 feet, 50 feet, this, that, and the other, because you're thinking of all the sea ice.
right.
It's actually zero, okay? Because if you think about it, if you take a glass of water, you fill it with ice,
Hmm.
and let the ice melt, is the water going to overflow? No, right? There's some air pockets that will
Right.
cause subtle
Change
differences, but
volume.
for the most part,
Right.
it's not going to overflow the glass.
Right. It would be marginal. I mean, ice flows, but barely.
Yes.
Yeah.
So when it comes to us worrying about sea level rise and things like that, you really want to pay attention to the glaciers. If all the land ice melts,
Hmm.
then your sea levels are going to come up.
Oh, okay. So it's not frozen icebergs that we find up around the poles. It's what's actually stacked up on top of land masses
Yep.
that could potentially slough down
Hmm.
into the ocean that can
Exactly.
cause the most drastic change.
Yes. And we're actually, I mean, Geologically, we're technically still in an ice age because we have ice on the earth.
Yeah. So yeah, we had a geologist on two months ago.
Yeah.
He's like, yeah, you guys know that we're in an ice age, and we're like, get out.
Yes, we're still in an ice age. So yeah.
All right. So
Wow.
yeah, I think this was new to me when I heard it, and I was at least 32 when someone first mentioned it to me. So what is an ice age then?
So where there's ice, basically land ice on the planet year
Okay.
round. So glaciers.
Okay.
Mhm.
Okay. Typically on the poles.
Typically on the poles, yes.
Okay.
So, well, I wouldn't say typically because, 10, 15, 20,000 years ago, we had massive glaciers, where we are here today in Wyoming, all around most of the Midwest, the Northeast, you had these massive, massive glaciers. I mean, I'm just talking about ice. I'm not talking about little patches. I'm talking about it's just ice. Like if you were to go hike up into the winds and go to the tippy top of those mountains where there's glaciers, it would be like that, but on the land mass.
Oh my gosh. So so like ice multiple miles thick.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Holy cow.
Yeah. Hmm.
Yeah, so is it like Antarctica, like the biggest threat, since it's like, wasn't it like 3 miles of ice? in the,
So
like-
I'm not sure how thick that is,
Oh.
that landmass specifically.
Mm.
We have glaciers in North America, over in, Russia and things like that.
Mhm.
But it is one of our larger areas in the world where we have a ton of ice because it's really, really cold down there.
Mm.
And that's definitely something to worry about.
That's interesting.
So but you're saying for the last 10,000 years, there's been basically a melting event.
Hmm.
And in geological terms, 10,000 years is a relatively brief chapter.
Oh yeah.
So this
Very
could be
small.
this could be all called like one event, even though
Mhm.
it's lasted 10,000 years.
Yeah,
Okay.
and it's gone back a little bit longer than that. I say the word 10,000. I mean, that's when noticeably we've seen this increase in sea level rise from the melting of glaciers and this rapid turnaround of, oh, the planet is warming.
Mhm.
And there's been multiple glacial periods even before that. Like, we've come in and out of where we've had a ton of ice and then not so much ice, back, even millions of years ago.
Right. So so is this event, I'm going to call it, is it ongoing? I mean, are we in an ice age, but in a warming up period inside that ice age? Is that
Correct. Yeah.
that's safe to assume, or we think we know that?
Yeah. I mean, that's what's happening. That's what we're seeing.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
And is there any reason to think that this will change in the next 10,000 years, or who
Yeah,
knows?
I think it's just a who knows at this point.
Right.
There's a lot of factors that go into this to where we could have just up the road, we could have Yellowstone explode. It's a massive super volcano.
Yeah, the caldera.
And you have, no more sunlight and you could go back and do an ice age. I mean, something like that could happen in a really short period of time.
Right.
And you're just an oh shoot moment that, at that point it's life or death. And sorry, Lander, you'd probably be gone if that happened. But yeah, it would
Yeah,
be,
well,
it'd be
that's yeah.
catastrophic.
A professor of mine in college was telling me, he's like, "Oh yeah, the caldera could blow. Like, there's no reason to think it won't blow tomorrow. It just probably won't."
Yeah.
I said, "Like, what are we gonna do?" He said, "Well, I'm gonna tell you, the last 10 seconds of watching that thing like crater the earth in front of you." He's like, "That would be a sight to see."
Mhm.
He's like, "I'm actually thinking I'm sticking around for it and just."
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, and we have other super volcanoes around the world. We have one over in Italy. We got
Oh.
up in Russia. So it's just not isolated here in the United States. So any of those could go. And then, you hope it's not in your backyard and it's somewhere else, but it's going to cause, global issues.
It would be a catastrophe.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, for the entire globe.
Yep.
I mean, it
Mhm.
would affect agriculture, it would affect shipping,
Certainly.
it would affect everything.
Yep.
Communications, I assume. I mean,
Yeah. I mean, it's plumes of ash that would, cake the entire atmosphere. We would eventually see the effects. I don't know how long it would take the ash for travel all the way around the world, but sunlight would be, wouldn't be common, especially at the explosive, where it's exploding, but you would see the
but
effects
also
here.
downwind, so to speak,
Yeah,
wherever
mhm.
the dominant winds carried that ash
Yeah.
plume. And it would take years to settle, as
Oh yeah.
I understand
Mhm.
it correctly.
So if it happens, the best place you probably want to be is maybe like Hawaii if it's
Mm.
Yellowstone, because it would take a really long time to come around.
Right,
And it'd be a bit warmer down there because you're closer to the equator, but
Yeah. Right.
So-
But it's not going to be a resort anymore.
No, yeah.
Holy cow.
yeah.
Yeah, no. Well, what really bothered me was, again, we were talking to this geologist, and I thought like, oh, we're wake up, the caldera blows, and like we're gone, right?
Mhm.
And he said, oh no, 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 no. He said, we think that we'd have about a week's worth of warning, right? Like the activity would be so drastic, it would be so bizarre. They'd be like, this is something's happening. And that actually bothered me more because I was like, man, a week you can kind of make a plan. You know what I mean? A week you can try to get away and you can
Yeah.
decide between like quick instant death and sort of like trying to eke out survival in the Mad Max apocalypse that will surely follow.
Yeah. No, and we have instruments that can help measure that. And
Yeah.
I wasn't around for Mount St. Helens, but when Mount St. Helens, are you guys familiar with where that's located? It's Cascades, West Coast,
Is that off the coast of Washington?
Oregon. So
Oregon, okay.
it's south. It's in Oregon, south of Seattle, land
Mhm.
volcano.
Mhm.
And so that erupted in 1980s. And before that eruption, they were getting all sorts of warning signs of, hey, we're seeing increased seismic activity, movement going around. We believe this thing's going to explode.
Okay.
We don't know when, but the signs are there.
Mhm.
And so they, evacuated some, people say, hey, get off the mountain, move. You had some people who were like, oh, I'm not going to listen to these scientists.
Bah humbug.
And they stayed, and unfortunately they were taken. So there are ways for us to kind of, look to see if there's any sort of activity that's
Mhm.
like, hey, this is an issue. For Yellowstone, I mean, that if me as a geologist hears, hey, we got some issues, that's like an oh shoot moment. That's where, hey, I need to go spend my time in church and start praying because the end is near.
Yeah.
So
Okay, so
it's
Mount St. Helens on the scale of volcanoes is actually fairly small.
compared to Yellowstone, yes. So I mean, Yellowstone is massive. It is a massive, massive caldera.
Mm,
I mean, Mount St. Helens is just a little cone. I mean, relative to everything else, like to us, it's big. It's a
mm,
huge mountain.
mm.
But Yellowstone, super volcano, uh, Mount St. Helens, they call it a stratovolcano, and it's much much smaller. You have one area, one volcano that has a magma chamber underneath that is going to shoot up magma and then eventually lava
Whoa.
at some point. So
Yeah.
yeah. And Rainier's the same. So Mount Rainier is north of that. It's in the same volcanic mountain range.
Yeah.
And so that one, it can go any moment too. It's not going to cause any worldly catastrophic, but Seattle would be in trouble. And so they got their own issues out there. If that were to go, you could
Right.
see something similar to Mount St. Helens.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Okay. All right. So it would be kind of a state level event, something that would certainly.
And you guys most over here probably see some ashfall from that volcano,
Mm,
from that event as well. And I wouldn't be surprised for those that grew up in Lander, maybe they saw stuff from Mount St. Helens too.
right. Right. Yeah. This is going back what, like 40 years?
Yeah.
Something like that.
Mhm.
Yeah. No, we'll have to ask around, see if anyone could speak to that. That's interesting. But no, but anyway, so going back to sand,
Yes,
going back to building the beaches, saving the beaches. Yeah, I mean, what's the, all right, so I'm just envisioning currents promoted or created by a superstorm, be it a nor'easter or a hurricane. These create currents that then can channel sand away from the shoreline, and then they just deposit it like farther out from shore. Is that what
Sure.
happens?
Yeah. So they could either bring it offshore, they can move it further up the coast, down the coast.
Okay.
It's a really complex system to really track where the sediment is going.
Okay.
We know that over time, the shoreline on the East Coast is not stable. It's not
Mm,
stagnant. It's moving. And what we do is we come in to help building those beaches out to protect the infrastructure that's there. So whether
mhm,
it's protecting hotels, whether it's protecting private property,
mm.
and that can be a hot topic issue of like, well, why are we protecting this private property when we could use that money to cure cancer or something like that? So just on that sort of level, if you think about
Right.
that,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And so it's like, well, does it bring in revenue for the town? Does it bring in the revenue for the government in terms of taxes?
Mhm.
There's all sorts of players in economics that go involved into saving the beaches to have tourism.
Right.
It's the biggest
Right.
driver. Mhm.
Uh-huh. Wow. I mean, do you ever do you have to ever like push your way past protesters, be like, let the beaches leave? Yeah.
No, I haven't done that. So with my line of work, I work for the federal government, and
Okay.
so all of if a town wants to say, hey, we want federal assistance to build out our beach and make it better, and we want the federal government to help us do this. one of the things that we do is we come up with a benefit cost ratio.
Mhm.
Okay. And this is something where if you're my investor, you're helping me invest my fortune. And if I give you $1 and you're like, hey, Steven, I'm going to take that dollar and make you $2, I'm going to stick with you. But if I give you that dollar and you're going to give me back 25 cents, then I'm going to go somewhere else.
Sure.
So what we do with our beach, with the federal government assisting these towns, is we look at their economic situation. How many tourists they have coming in? What's the property value? What are the taxes? All these sorts of things to then decide, okay, if we go in and nourish a beach and it's going to cost, go back to example, $1 and it's going to yield $2,
Yeah.
then it's in best interest of the government and the town to, hey, we're going to bring in X number of tax dollars, X number of tourism that's
Yeah.
going to be beneficial to everybody.
Right. Right. Okay. Right. And it's certainly true that these touristy areas have a lot of infrastructure built up, right?
Mhm.
Like if all the sand moves from here and it moves 300 miles north, well, maybe that's off the coast of a national park, right? And all of
Yeah.
a sudden, like, well, the beach up there at the national park is bigger, great. But all of a sudden, yeah, it washed away the boardwalk. And now,
Yeah.
now the arcades, I'm sliding into the ocean. Like, God damn, can't make any money now. So
Mhm.
what's the you were describing this to me somewhat the other day, but I want to ask you more about it. I mean, what's the mechanism? I mean, it almost sounded to me as if you were vacuuming sand off the ocean floor.
Sure. Yeah. So one of the things that we do to remove sand and put it on the beach is we have two types of equipment that we use. The first is called a cutter head dredge, and to your vacuum example, very similar to that, where you have they call it a cutter head,
Yep.
which looks like a nasty chainsaw that rotates and will dig into the ground to
Okay.
then suck up the sand and then pipe it up and put
But
it
is it
on the
kind of
beach.
conical shaped a little bit?
It is, yeah. It's
Okay.
almost like a big like drill bit
Okay.
that
Yeah.
goes into the ground. And that force, that energy, that suction sucks the sand and the water as well. So it
Mhm.
comes out. They call it a slurry and
Mhm.
pipes it out to the beach. And then bulldozers will move that material around and eventually build it out. The other type is called a hopper, and this is where you have actually a boat with they call it a drag arm, and the drag arm set on the ground, and it literally drags across the ocean, sucks up sand, and that sand actually gets loaded into the boat.
Mhm.
So it gets
Okay.
loaded into the boat, and then it goes up. It's almost like mowing the yard, if you will, going back and forth. And it has a full load, and then it goes to a pump out location close to the beach, and then it pumps it out. And that's another method that
The
we
boat just goes back and forth, basically layering sand down.
well, not layering. So this is sucking it up.
Oh,
So this is
sucking it up. Oh,
removing
okay.
it, and then it goes to an area where a pump out location to then pump it on the beach, and then
Okay.
the bulldozer.
And you pump it out as the slurry. Okay,
Exactly.
it's pretty easy to move, and then the
Mhm.
water presumably drains
Drains out.
away and
Exactly.
back into the water,
Mhm.
and you've got more beach.
Yep.
I did not even know this existed. I mean,
had
I
no
don't
clue.
like right. Like, how many career nights have I helped out at colleges, and I could have told people you could go work on beaches.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, this is wild. I mean, what was this? Was this something you had your eye on in college, or was this something that there was a job available and it was in your field, so you
Mhm.
moved in that direction?
Yeah. A couple of things. I remember just being a younger kid. I grew up in Virginia Beach, so surfed a lot,
Mm,
went to the beach a ton, and I noticed that they were doing this beach nourishment project. You know what
mm,
we just described. There's a dredge offshore sucking sand, and they were putting sand on Virginia Beach. And I was like, that's pretty cool.
mhm.
Like, how do they do that? And just kind of like this was when I was in high school and never really thought about it until I got to college. Had a really good a good professor that was into coastal geology, and went back home for a winter, and they're doing the same project. And I was like, man, this looks cool. Like they're taking sand from offshore and they're building this beach out,
Right.
and that's kind of what just prompted me to focus on coastal geology,
Okay.
um, stay in the geology world of looking at coastal environments and how sand moves along the shoreline.
Mm,
And there's other careers you can go in geology. As a geologist, you can go in the oil gas industry. You
yeah.
go into the groundwater industry,
Mm,
looking at contaminants. You can go into teaching, academia. coastal geology it's a really small niche. There's not a lot of coastal geologists out there.
Right.
And
Because most people either do something in ocean, like oceanography,
Mhm.
or they do something more like mineral extraction or
Mhm.
or environmental quality type stuff.
Exactly.
Okay.
And I just, I want to be on the coast. I like surfing. So, this is kind of, it worked out. I worked at a private engineering firm that was doing a lot of beach nourishment stuff.
Yep.
And then found a job with the government and been doing this ever since.
Right. Wow.
What
Man.
does like a normal operation day look like when you're doing this? Is there like a few of these machines and boats out at once, or like?
It depends on the job. So one of the more recent jobs that we just completed was a town called Wrightsville Beach, and it's actually in our own backyard of Wilmington. It's a place I surf all the time, and they used a 30-inch pipe was the size of they were pumping the sand out, 30-inch pipe,
30 inch.
and yeah, it's a big pipe, and so
There's a lot of slurry.
yeah, yeah. And so they had about maybe like 4 bulldozers on the beach maintaining that. And what they'll do is so they'll have the dredge, in the water, and then you'll have a pipe that's going to where they're going to place the material. And what they'll add to the pipe is a bivalve. So if they're trying to if it's a lower tide, they can switch the pipe to have pump on the lower end of the beach, and then as the tide comes up, they can then switch the bivalve to go to the higher end.
Hmm.
So they'll work that way. Once they complete a section of beach, they'll then shut the dredge down. They'll add more pipe, extend it out, and they'll keep working.
Okay.
These jobs, like the one we just did here, can range anywhere between 1 million to 2 million cubic yards of sand, and that takes anywhere between 3 to 6 months to place.
Wow.
A million. So you said 1 million to 2 million
1 million to 2 million cubic yards of sand.
cubic yards of sand.
Yeah.
Wow.
Mhm.
Whoa.
And they weigh out 3 to 6 months.
All right.
It takes them to work. Most of the dredging occurs in the wintertime when the tourists aren't there. Sometimes we run into certain issues where we get funding, or hey, we have an emergency renourishment and we'll need to nourish in the summertime. But most of the time in North Carolina, we try to target the in the winter months. So yeah.
Okay. Is it also, do you get more stability because the ocean is colder in the winter? So you get, I mean,
No, it's quite the contrary, actually. So in
Okay.
the wintertime, we can get a lot more storms on the East Coast.
Okay.
And that like nor'easters and things like that. So it's a
Jeez.
trickier spot to work in. Summertime's actually easier.
Right.
It's a little bit more calmer, but you run the threat of run into a hurricane that could come up. So,
Right.
but wintertime is definitely trickier. You have a lot of unstable conditions. It's very windy. It's windier in the wintertime on the East Coast. So
Yeah.
it's
So
not
it's
the
just
best
less
case.
pleasant. Yeah. You're
It's
just
less pleasant, and the reason we go in the winter, not only for the tourists, but it's for environmental reasons. So we get a lot of nesting sea turtles, nesting or shorebirds that will come up on the beach in the summertime,
Oh, okay.
and we don't want to be disturbing those threatened species.
Yep.
So we work with our environmental folks to, hey, we have these specific windows. They call them environmental windows of where we're only going to nourish from November to March,
Mhm.
and that's our window. If we go past the window, then we have to then have a monitoring plan to say, okay, we have someone to go down the beach, make sure we don't see any turtle tracks that laid any nests. If they do, we have to mark them and make sure we don't disturb them.
Right.
Mhm.
Right. As you add sand, so those little baby sea turtles
Yeah.
are just the longer run to the water.
It is.
The seagulls are like dive bombing on them.
We have every beach has volunteers that helps with the turtle hatching. So they'll actually dig little trenches so it's an easier gateway. But once they hit the water, it's
Right.
fish, birds, whatever. It's free
Right,
game at that
right.
point. Yeah.
Yeah, I can just imagine the sea turtle be like, "Damn it, they added 600 more feet of beach," you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah. Well, so one thing my brother and I always talk about is just unintended consequences and trade-offs, right? And my brother likes to quote Thomas Sowell and say, like, there's no solutions, there's only trade-offs, right? What are some of the unintended consequences or some of the trade-offs that you see with the type of projects that you do?
Like as in like positive or
Positive or negative? I mean,
yeah. So I mean, I guess it. I guess a couple of positives is, the town gets more beach, it's
Right.
protecting infrastructure.
Yep.
The other thing too, people don't realize from a positive standpoint, from environmentally, is you have more habitat from a beachfront standpoint for the turtles to nest, for the
Mm,
birds to forage and to feed,
okay.
and things like that. The negative stuff is just, you have a lot of people who are like, hey, we shouldn't be saving these multi-million-dollar businesses, or homes, or taxpayer dollars shouldn't be going towards supporting this. It should be going towards something
Saving
else.
some billionaire's backyard.
Yes, exactly. And so there can be some political things going on,
Yeah.
that can make it, there was an article released, maybe a month ago talking about that very thing of, hey, is this worth saving? But there's tons of other projects out there outside of building beaches of, hey, well, why should we contribute to building a levee around New Orleans?
Hmm.
New Orleans is in a bowl; it's below sea level.
Hmm.
Why are we wasting money to save this town? And it was flooded once during Katrina, and billions of dollars went into it to rebuild the levees and to make sure everything was good. So you're going to have that negative feedback wherever you go,
Right.
on any project. Doesn't have to be, could be a beach, could be a levee, could be a dam,
Yeah.
anything.
Yeah. Right.
Mhm.
As soon as you do anything, there will be critics.
Yes.
Right. Right. Wow, man. And so if if this if this work was not being done, I mean, would on the whole, do you believe the East Coast would be gradually eroding? Again, we're talking, large scale. If you just looked at the Florida to Maine coastline, would we just in 30 years would there just be less of it, or is it hard to say what would happen on the balance?
Yeah, so it's the sand would get moved in certain places. There certainly would be a lot of houses that would be in trouble. Your first row houses may be gone, and it depends on the beach. Not every beach is the same.
Right.
We know that sea level is rising. We've seen this from just aerial photographs of, hey, it used to be here and now it's all the way here.
Yeah.
We see it in the Outer Banks with these, you had a front row of houses that are just completely wiped. And this is inevitable. The only thing that I guess you could do is maybe build a giant seawall to prevent the water from coming up, but that's going to cost a heck of a lot of money.
Mm,
And sea level is rising, the glaciers are melting. It's imminent. And how can we do to kind of add a band-aid is have these beach nourishment projects. But who knows how long it's going to take. Could be 100, 200 years from now where it's like, hey, we're not able to keep up with the sea level rise that's
mhm.
coming. And then that's where some questions of, hey, we got to get rid of these houses. There was a few instances back in the 60s. One particular area up in the Delmarva Peninsula, which is like Delaware, Virginia, Maryland.
Mm.
There's an island called Assateague.
I've been there.
Okay,
With
nice.
the wild horses.
Wild horses.
Oh
Yes.
my God.
Yes.
So, all right, all right. I went there one afternoon. I didn't even know it existed.
Mhm.
Some buddies of mine were like, dude, if you're traveling through that area, don't care how long it takes, like take half a day, go out to Assateague. And
Yes.
so I did. And man, I got out there probably like 4 or 5 in the afternoon. So the sun was just starting to dip.
Mhm.
Had been this huge thunderstorm over the land, but it had moved out over the water. So like I was on this beach and there were like wild horses off to my left. The sun was starting to get to that golden hour behind me, and there was this huge thunderstorm out over the water in front of me. Like the lightning
Yeah. Yeah.
strikes were
Yeah.
hitting the ocean. I was like, "Holy cow. I feel like I've come to the edge of the world." I mean, it was just so elemental what I
Yeah.
was anyway. But okay, but yeah,
So
acetate.
Assateague. No, it's a great place. I did a lot of my undergraduate research out there,
Yeah.
too. But so I spent a lot of time. But I think it was in the 1960s. There was an Ash Wednesday storm that obliterated the island. There's actually a road that still exists on the island. They call it Baltimore Avenue. It's all covered in sand now.
Mm,
But there used to be houses there. There used to be a community there back in the 60s. This storm on Ash Wednesday wiped it out. Never to rebuild again. Became a national park.
right.
So we could foresee that happening with, a couple hundred years, 1,000 years, however long we have left on this planet, that, we have to come to some serious decisions of, hey, like this is our nourishment rate isn't keeping up with, what what is to come. So
To some degree,
yeah.
you are like that kid running around trying to keep his sandcastle built
Hmm.
in the face of an incoming tide.
Exactly.
You can keep it at bay for a while,
Yep.
but ultimately we're dealing with rising sea levels. That water has to be somewhere.
Hmm.
Jeez.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you ever like lie in bed at night and be like, man, is it all is it all for naught?
No, I mean, I don't, it's, again, these, what we see are just
Projections.
projections.
Yeah.
We could see a shift in the climate and something turn around. I certainly don't lose sleep over it. But you look at the geologic history and you're like, you know, something's gonna give in the next 500 to 1,000 years of either we have to change our engineering strategies of how we're gonna save these beachfront properties, or we let them go. You know, and so the beach will always be there. The island's just gonna keep rolling back, and so it's just a matter of time
Hmm.
that when that happens.
Has there been a study on how much the levels would rise if all the land glaciers did melt?
So I believe there is an estimate, and I don't know off the top of my head of what that would be.
Yeah.
I know it would be very significant.
Okay.
Much of southern Florida would be underwater,
Mhm.
um, and a lot of other places. But I know Florida,
West gone.
yeah, most that South Florida is already having issues to begin with when it comes to just on a sunny day where they see flooding. So, we're going to see this based on the projections. We're going to continue to see this, and it's only going to get worse. And we, as geologists and engineers, have to find solutions to protect infrastructure. But
Mm.
sometimes it's just too much money, and you got to condemn these homes
Yeah,
and
take the
use them.
insurance claim and
Mhm. Yep. Yep.
that is wild.
Oh,
Wow. Okay, but your work, I mean, your work is the work inside someone's human lifetime, right? It's
Hmm.
like, okay,
Exactly.
what is the best way to live and what is the best way to run a community in this 60 to 100 year period, right?
Hmm.
You're not going gray over like, well, what will it be like in 500 years? Like in
Yeah.
500 years, everything's going to be so different.
It is. And
Yeah.
one thing that we do is when we're coming across a new project is we call them beach templates.
Mm.
And a beach template basically says, hey, we're going to build the berm this high, and the berm is basically the area of where it's not inundated by the tide. It's where most people set up their beach chairs and their umbrellas.
Yeah.
And then you're going to build your dune, which is a big mound of sand, to
Hmm.
this height.
Hmm.
And what we typically do is we'll look at it from a 50-year period of, okay, what's the sea level rise going to do in that 50-year period? And we're going to throw a bunch of, and this is all on a big supercomputer. We're going to throw a bunch of, hurricanes and nor'easters at it to then build this optimized template to say, hey, in 50 years from now, we need the berm to be this height, the dune to be this height to protect these houses. So fast forward 500 years from now, we could be doing the same thing. And it's like, well, we need a berm, quadruple the height than what we did 100 years ago to
Right.
save these houses.
Right.
But then that runs into the next issue of the availability of sand. Okay. If you don't have the sand offshore to build your template, what you're trying to build, then you run into a serious issue.
Right.
Right.
Right. Yeah. We're never thought of sand as a precious natural
It is.
resource.
It is.
Dang.
Mhm.
Yeah. Growing up around Vermont and then working in New Hampshire and then a little bit north of Massachusetts. I mean, they called us the Rust Belt because what they would put on the roads is, a combination of sand and salt.
Mhm.
And so there was all these, and then there would be complaints when that stuff was scooped up post storm and then dumped into the ocean, right? And so we'd always joke like, why is everyone worried about the water, sand, and salt being picked up and dumped into the ocean, which is composed of water, sand, and salt?
Yeah.
But anyway, for us, sand was just something you threw on the road and drove over.
Mhm.
But for you guys, at the scale you're talking about, there's just not millions of cubic yards of sand just sitting around
Exactly.
easily accessible.
Mhm.
And so where is it to be had from?
Mhm.
Right. If you needed that berm to be 4 times higher,
Yeah.
where are you going to go get it?
Mhm.
Right. And at what cost?
Exactly. I mean, and it's the same way with our fossil fuels, coals, oil, natural gas. At some point, it's gonna run out,
Mhm.
and then it's like, well, then like, what do you do as a society? Now, it's not gonna run out for a very, very, very long time, but it's going to run out at some point. And that's just another, I mean, that's just another thing to think about, or Yellowstone erupting and then the world ends. But it's just, I don't keep myself at night of any of those things. But it's something that, hopefully the technology advances to where we can use those fossil fuels more efficiently, and go from there.
That's so cool. I mean, like you hear about like different projects that are happening, but you don't really get to talk to the people working on them. So I don't know. I
Yeah.
think it's just so cool that there is such a emphasis on keeping beaches there.
Hmm.
'Cause I mean, it reminds me of Jordan Peterson. He was talking about like there's a nihilist that's of the opinion that, oh, it's not going to matter in 10,000 years, so why bother today? And he's like, well, do bother today because it matters today, like
Mhm.
there's going to be families on those beaches, going to be people having great memories there, things are going to be happening, like all these things, life is going to happen if you have that environment for it.
Right.
So it is a good thing to do,
Right.
like
Yeah, it's like an art curator or art, yeah, someone who preserves or restores art, being like, what am I doing? Like, all right, maybe I get it to last another 500 years, but in 10,000 years, this, it'll have crumbled to dust. But then you consider what joy, what inspiration, what moments has that work of art given to people over the years? How many more can be given to those human souls who now consider that? It sounds like you're doing something similar, right? I mean, just
Mhm.
given how much human beings love to be by the water,
Yep.
right? Those days of joy of watching the sun come up, or if you're on the West Coast, watching the sun go down, and
Mhm.
these long idyllic days. I mean, it's one of the most profound human experiences to be where the land meets the water. I don't know why. Why is it that we value that so much? But we certainly do.
Mhm.
Yeah, and you're helping preserve that
Yeah.
for at least the next generation.
Trying to.
Trying to, yeah. Wow. Damn. Okay, but you also like surfing.
I do.
Yeah, tell us a little bit about that. I've I don't think I've surfed a day in my life.
Yeah, I mean, it's really hard to, I guess, describe the feeling of it.
Mm,
Riding a wave. I started surf or going. I mean, grew up on the beach, so I went there all the time when I was a kid. And
yeah.
it wasn't until I was about middle school where I was, I was riding a little boogie board on my belly, and riding the shore break, and noticed some surfers out there, and I was like, man, I want to try that. And I had a neighbor, had a couple extra boards, and tried it out for a summer. Was just getting like pummeled, didn't take any lessons, and I was like, but I just had this itch, like I got to stand up on this board and try it, because it's just a totally different feeling.
Right.
And there was a friend of mine, and I was at high school at that point. He was selling his board. It was like $180. And I said, hey, I'll buy it from you. And he's like, okay, sure. So I bought it, and I'm like bringing it home. My dad's like, why did you buy that? Like, you're never gonna surf. Like, you're never, like, you can't even drive. How do you get to the beach? I'll figure it out. I'll make it work. And then 15 years later, I'm still doing it. So
Yeah.
it's there's just something about it where, being out there on the water, it's very spiritual. And it's had a big influence in my life of staying close to the Lord.
Oh,
And
really? Huh.
it's taught me a lot of just perseverance
Yep.
through learning how to surf. It's very difficult to learn, to keep going and trying. Taught me a lot of patience as well. East Coast, we don't get a lot of waves, so
Mm,
you were always waiting around for a good storm to come to kick up some surf. So it taught me a lot of patience,
mm,
and it gave me a lot of peace too. When I'm out there surfing, I almost forget about everything that's going on, work, school, you name it. It's
mhm.
just kind of this, hey, I'm just focused on being out there in the ocean. And it's very therapeutic. We at home call it, it's the saltwater therapy, if you will.
Right.
And it's just a very unique sport. It's really hard to describe unless you're
Is it
doing
at
it.
all like skiing or
It's
snowboarding, or is it even like freer, looser?
I would say it's better. It's
Huh.
freer, I feel like. And I don't know, maybe it's because you're using a a wave, form of energy that's traveled, thousands of miles, from, where you are, and it's come to you to then eventually ride and take it. So,
Right.
skiing and snowboarding, you just go up and then you're in the powder and you're scooting down. But it's just something of tapping into another form of energy to ride.
Uh-huh.
That's really special.
Okay.
Mhm.
Okay. Yeah, and these waves can originate in the middle of the Atlantic, and
Yeah.
then I mean it's coming, yeah, thousands of miles to you.
Mhm.
Right. Um, okay, yeah, I'm trying to think of some equivalent experiences. I mean, I will say so right after college I went down to Belize and I did the Ruta Maya race, which is a 4-day canoe race. Um, which I mean, your butt gets really sore. But I do remember at the towards the end of the day on each day's route, you tended to hit some rapids. I don't know if they planned the route for that. I don't know exactly why.
Yeah.
But anyway, it was usually towards the end of the day. And I will say, like, you would just slot into these rapids. And we were in a canoe. I mean, we were not in the proper equipment for it exactly. And you're just shooting down and you're just sort of along for the ride. You have to navigate.
Yeah.
You have to stay in control of your boat, but in a certain way, you've just been lifted and taken for the flight. It's felt like. I mean, is that getting at something?
Yeah. I mean, a little
A
bit.
little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's again, it's just so hard to really mask words to or like put words together of what the feeling is like. I just
Yeah.
know when I've taken people out surfing for the first time or teaching someone how to surf and they catch that first wave, it's like, oh my gosh, this is incredible,
Right. Right.
And it's just that itch you get to go out there and do it again and again and again.
Uh-huh. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah. What's the have you done East Coast, obviously? Have you
Yes.
gone and
So I've never surfed the West
surfed over the
Coast.
West Coast? Okay.
I've surfed down in Puerto Rico,
Uh-huh.
but I've almost surfed in every state on the East Coast,
Okay.
minus Maine,
Right.
I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. So been all over.
Been all over.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mhm.
Where's the best surf for you?
Um, man. So there's not with the East Coast being all sand mostly, unless you get up into Maine and New Hampshire.
Mhm.
There's some rock. It really depends on the type of storm that's coming in, bringing in the swell, the waves, the wind direction, to really make a spot like fantastic.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, I lived in Wilmington for almost 10 years, and there's this little island to the south of us called Masonboro,
Uh-huh.
and everyone that I've talked to that's lived up and down the East Coast, they always say like that's the spot. It's in my backyard, fortunately.
Right.
It's there where you get the most consistent surf. The way the beach profile is with the sand and the sandbars there just sets it up for a unique spot and a unique break
Okay.
down there.
Right. Right. Wow. How many days a year do you usually get out?
I mean, if there's a wave, I'm out there. So
Right.
if there was a wave every day, I'd be out there every day. But
Right.
it comes and goes, depends on what life's throwing at me. But if there's a hurricane swell, I'm gonna find time to get out there.
Hmm.
I'd say at a minimum, I'm out there once a week.
Right. Right.
If you average, all the times that I surf throughout the year.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
at least once a week. Sometimes it'll be 3 to 4 times a week, depending on how long the swell sticks around, and how long my wife lets me out there. But
Right.
she'll occasionally go out too, which is fun.
Okay.
And it's fun for both of us on some smaller days, which is really fun.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Do
Gotcha.
you surf all seasons?
I do. So I have a wetsuit. I got gloves, boots, a hood. I've surfed when it's been, in the teens. The water temp's
Whoa.
38. So,
What?
we,
Oh
we
my
have
God.
we have the gear to last, those or to endure those intense conditions. But yeah, I
Are you
have
out there for like all day in that or mostly
so if you're
usually?
moving around, yeah,
Yeah.
but typically if it's like frigid, I mean, we're talking, the water temps in the low 40s and, you got, the air temp being in the 20s and 30s, you could last comfortably out there for 2 hours if you're moving around.
Yep.
But there's just kind of a certain point where, you're getting tired, you're not moving around as much.
Yep.
And, it's just, all right, I'm going to go in. People surf up in the Great Lakes, and that's even like more frigid than the East Coast, which I don't know how the heck they do that. I've never done that,
Right.
but I'm not sure what the tolerance is up there. But
Yeah.
you can look up photos in there. These guys having like icicles coming out of their beard, and it's just like too cold.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Jeez. Right. Am I correct in understanding that the surfing culture has chased different types of surf over the decades? I feel please correct me, but I feel like
Sure.
I read an article that said like in the 80s and early 90s, it was all about getting into curls, those big classic
Mhm.
curl over waves. People wanted to be shooting funnels,
Yeah.
coming down the coming down the pipe. And then as the 90s faded and got into the 2000s, then it was like big waves. You know what I mean? It was big water.
Yeah.
I have no idea what it is now. Am I tracking this correctly, or is there's always different pockets of the culture?
Yeah. So I'm for me personally, surfing, I never was really in like, I mean, I surfed a lot, but like in like a surf group culture, I was kind of a nomad. I just surfed by myself. And I actually don't stay up with all the professional surfers of who's doing what. I just do surfing because I love it.
Mm.
I will say there's this new type of surfing that's kind of taking flight. That's called prone foiling. And it's where you have this large fin that's out the bottom of the board and you start on your stomach like you're surfing your paddle for a wave. But when you catch the wave, because you have this long fin, you actually stay above the surface of the water
Mhm.
and you can pump to propel yourself off the wave and continue that momentum to then continue to catch another wave. So it's all
Whoa.
self-propelled as you're pumping that energy, and it's because that the way the fin is engineered,
Mm.
it's able to keep you moving through the water. And the way it gets you to stand up is because the energy that's being in the wave itself, the fin captures that, it rises you up, and I mean, you should look it up. It's pretty mesmerizing to watch.
Right.
Um, Prone foiling, but that's
Okay.
kind of the new thing that's starting to uh, kind of take into the surf culture,
Right. Right.
which it's a lot more expensive. You can go to a store in town and buy a surfboard for like a foam board for like $100.
Right.
And so anyone can do it. But like this prone foiling, I mean, you can spend it to get a board and a whole setup's like $3,000. So
Whoa.
Jeez.
it can be really expensive. So if you're really into surfing, you can make that investment. But that's kind of people who are into surfing and really like it. They're taking this next step of prone foiling is
Prone
what we're seeing.
foiling.
Yeah.
Okay. Huh.
Are you considering getting into it?
Yeah.
I have a couple of buddies that are into it, and yeah, I said send me some stuff let me price it out. But I don't know. It's
You
it's a
can't
big
retrofit one of these things onto a board you
no.
already
Yeah,
have. Okay.
yeah. You have
That's
to
a
get the whole setup. It's totally different board. It's much smaller.
yeah.
But it's I've entertained the idea. I think what I typically do is once something starts getting really popular, I'll wait a little while.
Mhm.
'Cause typically when you wait, the prices start to drop.
Yeah.
Right.
It's
Yeah.
like, when people were getting the first iPhone, how much was that compared to what you could get, a general smartphone now, you get it for a couple $100. But,
Right.
just kind of wait for it to kind of die down the craze and then maybe pounce on something later in the future.
Right. Right. Okay. But the advantage of it is that it allows you to get more consecutive rides because you don't have to ride in, paddle back
Yeah, you
out.
can stay pumping and then catch the next, like I mean, it is very, very exhausting.
Right.
And it's a huge learning curve. A lot of my friends are getting into it. Like, they're still trying to figure it out. So it's just kind of learning surfing all over again.
Hmm. Wow. Okay, but it's basically an extra hydroplane that hangs down below your board.
Yep.
Damn. Oh,
Yeah, it's cool.
man.
It's cool
That
stuff.
is
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah. How do people surf? I've seen some videos and my mouth is just on the floor. How do people surf and survive some of these 80, 90 foot,
Mm.
even 100 foot waves?
Yeah, so serious training. I haven't looked into what goes into the training that they have to do, but this is not your regular Joe Schmo, doing drugs that just walks out there and says, "Hey, I'm gonna go ride an 80-foot wave." I mean,
He does that once.
yeah, there's a rigorous training that these guys do,
Uh-huh.
and a piece of equipment that they'll wear is an impact vest, and so it's just something that prevents them if they do a wipeout and are gonna get crushed by this wave, it essentially protects them from getting seriously hurt and allows them to float up to the surface as well.
Okay.
And so, but there's also a lot of planning that goes into it. So a lot of these big wave surfers actually get towed into these waves. So they'll be riding on the back of a jet ski, kind
Yep.
of like wakeboarding,
Yep.
and they'll then tow them into the wave and then they'll ride it. And everyone's kind of looking out for each other. If someone goes down, the jet skis are ready to go in and try to pick them up before the next set goes. But sometimes they're in the impact zone and there's 2 or 3 waves after that, and they're just getting waves on the head. Um, sadly, people do die from it.
Right.
But it's definitely some people they have that itch. they'll have a wipeout, but they're like, hey, I'm gonna go and do it again.
Right.
Personally, for me, I have no desire to do that.
Uh,
I have just as much as fun as a wave that is 2 to 3 feet high. I guess it's just for the likes and whatnot, but
I mean, I guess at the edge of every sport, there has to, I mean, you guys, there are guys getting sponsorships. They're doing it professionally. They are having to keep their name at the cutting edge of the sport. I mean, it's their livelihood
yeah,
as well as I'm sure a competitive instinct. I mean, you're not
Mhm.
competing against each other exactly, but in a way you are of like who can ride these beasts,
Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
Yeah. I mean, I remember seeing this one video. It was like there must have been 50 people in the water, and it was off the coast of Spain, like
Mhm.
off the coast of, I want to say Catalonia or something. It was these huge, I mean, 70, 80-foot waves,
Yeah.
like just roaring in around this lighthouse,
Oh,
right?
that's probably Nazaré in Portugal.
Nazar. Oh, in Portugal.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. All
Yeah.
right. Not Spain.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it wasn't like, oh wow, one guy managed to do it. It was like the water was full of people,
Yeah.
all getting towed out with the jet
Mhm.
skis and then just
Yep.
riding things.
It's incredible.
I mean, I was looking at it, I was like, so all these people are going to be dead by the end of the day,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
I couldn't believe it.
I know. I don't know how they do it. Yeah, the guts to do that,
Mm.
and it's just if you're used to being around big surf all the time,
Uh-huh.
then it's just kind of second nature.
Yeah.
There'll be when we get down to Puerto Rico to surf. There's days where I'm not going in the water. It's just too big.
Wow.
Just because I'm not used to that.
Right.
And
Well, and you have a wife, you have a
exactly.
family,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
You've got other things going on
Yep. Hmm.
other than
Yeah. Yeah.
I gotta catch the
I
wave.
know.
I think for some people, yeah, the water is sort of their mistress, right? I mean,
Mhm.
it's like it's the one thing they live for.
Yeah.
I mean, it has to be like that at the hyper competitive levels.
Hmm.
So, man, what a sport. I mean,
It is. Yeah.
but I mean, I guess those guys, I assume, are also just they catch it right, and they're just having the ride of a lifetime,
Hmm.
right? I mean, and this, I mean, on a wave that big, I mean, the ride might be like 2 or 3 minutes. Am I
No,
less than that? Maybe
it's
six.
definitely not that long.
Okay.
Again, with waves like at Nazare, I mean, you're looking, maybe 30 seconds from the drop in to them coming out at most.
Hmm.
It's tough to tell sometimes when you watch it on like YouTube because it's like, well, did they slow the camera down to like capture it rather than watching it in real time?
Hmm.
But I mean, you're looking at most. I mean, I would even see even less than 30 seconds. It's not a long ride, put it that way.
Okay.
Yeah. Mhm.
Okay. Wow. So yeah, so
Yeah.
much less than two
Yeah.
minutes. Okay.
Mhm. Yeah.
Wow. And then at the end of it, I mean, they're often diving into the water and just diving down to
So it
avoid the
depends. So if
break.
they make it across where, the way the break, depending on where you're at in the world, like a
Hmm.
place like Nazaré, typically the way the waves that come in and how they break, you can basically escape to where you're in an area of calm water.
Okay.
And so you're not having to like hold your breath or anything like that. You're just kind of, okay, I'm in a safe area.
Yep.
And this kind of deeper portion of where no wave is going to come in and break on me. But
Right.
if you fall where the wave is breaking, then you're in serious trouble.
Right. Right.
Well, 80-foot waves, isn't that tsunami level waves?
So with tsunamis, those are a little different. If you go and look to see there's some really, really good images of tsunami waves coming in. I think there was an earthquake. It was like 2010
Is this
in Japan.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because you think of a tsunami, you think of this massive, massive wave. The movies kind of tricked us to all think
The
that.
big curl,
Yeah,
like coming
exactly.
down on the Statue of Liberty type
Yep,
deal.
exactly. And it's not quite like that. When an earthquake happens, it's displacing water in the ocean, and it's essentially just forcing a massive amounts of water out to wherever that energy is going.
Yeah.
And with tsunamis, it's not typically like one wave; it's a series of waves. Um, there's some other really good footage I think out there you could find on the internet of the Sumatra earthquake where you had this massive. You guys may have heard this before. When a tsunami comes in, typically right before it hits, there's this massive retreat of water. I don't know
Uh-huh.
if you guys have.
I've read that.
So there's
Yeah.
just this like pool of water, and people are like, oh my gosh, like what's happening? And they start walking out, which is like not
Steve did his job. The beaches are huge.
so you see this massive retreat of water.
Right.
It's like, well, what is that? Well, actually, if you know the anatomy of a wave, you have a crest and you have
Yeah.
a trough. Right?
Yeah.
Crest to the top. So it's going like this and then
Yeah.
down to the trough.
Yeah.
So that's actually the trough of the tsunami wave that's coming in.
Okay.
So again, picture your wave like a big arc, here's your crest and then your trough is down here.
Right.
And so when that water recedes, that's the trough of the wave, all the water coming out before then it
And
rushes
the
back
energy
in.
is pulling that water up towards the crest.
Exactly.
Okay.
Mhm. And if you look at the Japan tsunami, I mean, you'll see, the waves are big, but they're nowhere near the size of the ones at Nazare, 80 feet. It's just this it's almost like a huge tide that's rushing in, or like a flash flood, if you will, of just this instantaneous water just coming out of nowhere and rising.
Mm-hmm.
So it's more like the volume of the water that's the dangerous part of tsunamis.
Exactly.
Mm.
I think I did see a video and it struck me as odd because, yeah, it was like an inch of water and then 2 inches of water and then
Yeah.
3 inches of
Just
water.
goes up.
And it wasn't so much this like huge breaker just smashing down. It was just like the water's coming and it's not stopping. Like, people are up at the top of the hill and they're like, and it's,
Yep.
but then it's like, 14 feet of water by the end of it. But it is, so the tsunami is a tsunami because it is coming where the water doesn't normally go. Is that?
Well, I mean, it's a seismic force. An earthquake is causing this movement of water to come towards the shore,
Right.
and it creates a wave. So, even though it looks kind of weird, it is a wave that's just displacing, and where there's displacement, that water's got to go somewhere, and it's
Yep.
just going to come all the way to on land.
Right. Right.
Mhm.
So usually it just goes way past where it normally would go. And so all the things that weren't built for that kind of water.
Oh yeah.
That's when
And there's in the places like Japan where they see this, I mean, they'll have like seawalls for tsunamis to kind of combat that, but
Mm.
it's not for everywhere. Like if there's like a nuclear power plant that's on the coast, then yeah, you want to have some pretty big seawalls to combat that rush of water coming in. But
Mm.
if you just have, a regular neighborhood, it's like, well, if a tsunami comes, we'll hear the warning and we'll go to high ground and
Right.
deal with the consequences after.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
I think I read somewhere that often you'll see fishermen who know how these things work. I mean, and they're booking it out into open water.
Yeah.
Like,
So that's the other thing you can do is just go out. If you see that happen, that warning sign is try to get as far out as you can.
okay.
'Cause once you're in deep water, that wave's not going to be breaking.
Yeah.
And it's not the 80-foot wave that you have to worry about. But
Yeah.
if you're in deep enough water to where that wave's not going to crest, you'll be in good shape.
Right. You'll just go over a swell.
Yep. Mhm.
All right.
Exactly. Exactly.
Is that wild? Yeah. Yeah. Because I think I've read some accounts of that, of like, yeah, all the fishermen knew it was like tonight, and they're like, and there's just all these boats just screaming out
Yeah.
into the water, and all the landlubbers are like, what are they doing?
Yeah. And the other thing too is another like a sign that you can look for is what's the wildlife doing?
Oh.
So there was talk of when the tsunami down in Indonesia happened back in 05 or whenever it was, elephants just started going to high ground. Like everything just started going to high ground. And everyone's like, what's going on? You can do the same thing. I do this all the time when at home when it comes to when we got hurricanes coming by. Is I'll look for the birds. Are the birds chirping? Is it lively atmosphere from a wildlife perspective? Because they know everything's good. And I've seen this happen. We had a really, really bad hurricane in 2018 where we had 40 inches of rain. We had 80-mile-per-hour winds for over a 24-hour period. I mean, it was bad. And I remember from every other hurricane that I've been down there for is, okay, I hear the insects, I hear the birds. A few days leading up to this hurricane, no birds, no insects. I mean, middle of summer, usually you hear a cricket or a cicada, something making it was just quiet. And that's what I told Erin at the time, my wife. I said, we got to get out of here. So we left, and
No way.
yeah, and it was power was out for 2 weeks. Fortunately, it wasn't a crazy amount of damage, just a lot of downed trees.
Yep.
But yeah, so it's paying attention to the wildlife and just your surroundings is another key thing. So any major snowstorm you get here in Lander or
Yeah.
anything like that, pay attention to what the animals are doing.
Right, right. You're not here, right around here. It's the chickadees, right? You know, if the chickadees are chirping, you know, it's going to be a pretty calm day.
Yeah.
But
Mhm.
dang, wow. So you actually went, you're like, wait, why do we have to go, honey? Don't hear crickets. You know?
And it's the same, even when I hear like a thunderstorm coming through,
Mm,
because we'll get some tornadoes and other things like that. And if there's a big thunderstorm, I'll kind of be like, okay, I hear the northern mockingbird, I hear the cardinal. Okay, it's not gonna be too bad.
okay, gotcha, gotcha. Wow, wow. That's just amazing. That's just not something we really associate with our normal technology centered life, where
Mhm.
it's like, yeah, what are the birds? What are the cicadas doing?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm gonna base my behavior around that. Yeah,
Yep.
that's wild. Yeah, Indonesia. Where are the elephants going? You
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. Why are they going to high ground?
Yeah,
Well,
all the elephants are going to the high ground.
yeah. Hmm. Hmm.
Dang. Now, okay, so no limit on your budget, no limit on your timetable. Where would you go to surf if you
Mm.
had the options?
Oh man. No, I think I would maybe want to go maybe somewhere over in Asia.
Uh-huh.
There's a lot of like Fiji, a lot of spots in Indonesia, just places where very few people have surfed before.
Right.
Very difficult to get to, but I think that would be somewhere that I would probably check out.
Okay.
Mhm.
Fiji, Indonesia.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Gotcha. And what is the style of surf there that
So it's all on a reef. Most of
okay.
it's reef break out there, which is a little more dangerous because it's a little harder than falling on sand. So you cut
Yeah.
yourself, and there's repercussions for that. But there's just some really spectacular surf over there that there's nowhere else in the world.
Right,
Mhm.
right. When you say spectacular surf, I mean, you're talking like just the frequency of rideable waves coming to the shore. Is it the size? Is it are they kind of all of a predictable, uniform style? I mean, like,
Yeah, so it would definitely go to that predictability. The surface of the water, the texture's clean.
okay.
The size and the shape.
Hmm.
Because if you have a wave that comes in that's just gonna, you know, build up and dump, you can't really ride it.
Uh-huh.
You want to find a way that you can go down the line of it where it's gonna crest and then have a breaking wave to the right or to the left rather than just breaking down in front.
Okay.
So there's a lot of breaks out there where it would set up for that nice ride down the
Mhm.
right or left of the wave.
Right. If you get like kelp or seaweed kind of rolling in, I mean, that'll ruin the riding, I assume.
Yeah, I mean, you definitely can feel it if you hit it.
Right.
I've never surfed on the West Coast, so I'm sure some other guys have experienced that where they hit a pile of kelp or something and it,
Right.
slows them down or
Yeah,
throws them off. But
yeah, yeah.
yeah, it can definitely disrupt that.
Wow. Wow. Huh. That's fantastic. Now, but I understand in addition to riding waves, you also like to fish.
I do. Yeah,
Yeah.
I love being out in the
Like
water.
deep sea fishing
I mean,
or
anything
just
coastal,
anything.
coastal or even rivers or lakes. I just like being on the water.
Right.
So, fishing's definitely, it takes a lot of patience, but, but
Yeah.
yeah, it's just, I don't know, something about it. I've done a little bit of, spear fishing before, with some friends doing some free diving, but not a whole lot of that. Most of it just, rod and reel, things like
Right,
that.
right. Yeah, I mean, around here on all the backpacking trips we did, I did quite a bit of fly fishing up in the mountains of the winds,
Hmm.
and I mean, it was great. I mean, there's just nothing like being basically by yourself out on an alpine lake in an early evening. You know, you just get the line going out over the water,
Yeah.
and it's
Nice and
calm, it's
calm.
peaceful,
Yeah.
and potentially you're supplementing dinner in a pretty
Hmm.
nice way. I mean, one time we were like, I forget even why we even knew this particular lake was so full of fish, but we were hiking through, it was like the middle of the day. And I don't know if one of the guys in my group was like, man, they're just really hopping over there. And we're like, all right, we're going to stop the hike. Like we just stopped what we were doing. We're like, let's go fish. And we all run down. And one guy breaks out the pan and the garlic and the butter. And then the other guy just squats by the shoreline. He's like, send me your catches. He was just gutting everything,
Yeah.
cleaning the fish. And then like two or three people were just hitting with the
Yeah.
rods. And it was just one of those days where everything was biting.
Hmm.
So there's like three guys catching fish, flipping them over to the guy over on the shoreline. He's opening them up, gutting them out, and then flipping it over the guy with the pan with garlic, salt, and butter.
Yeah.
And so
Nice.
we were eating trout like that had been swimming 2, 3 minutes before.
Great.
Oh man, it was such a memorable afternoon.
Yeah.
So yeah, I love the fly fishing up here in the mountains.
Mm.
It's very different. I've got a buddy, again, I kind of mentioned it. I was down in Belize for a year after college. And so a buddy of mine down there does a lot of deep sea fishing. And really, yeah, same thing, just really enjoys being out on the water,
Yeah.
and bringing in what he can. So is that something, deep sea fishing, that's something, mostly what you do down
No,
there?
so most of the stuff I do is just all like coast, like back bay coastal area.
Okay. From like a
Um,
kayak or
yeah, exactly. So kayak or like
Okay.
a small little john boat, 15, 16 feet,
Yeah.
and just go and, just some tidal creeks and, just fish,
Right, right. What are you fishing for?
anything that will bite.
Anything
It,
dumb enough to think
yeah,
might bait,
exactly.
yeah.
We'll catch drum, we'll catch bluefish, we'll catch, stingray, occasional shark.
Mhm.
Shark fishing, I definitely enjoy because it's the thrill of catching a shark.
Yeah.
But yeah, anything that will bite for sure.
Right, right.
What's like the biggest shark or fish you've got?
So the biggest shark that I've got, not too big. It was maybe like 4 or 5 feet. But it's still that you caught a shark, which is
Still,
pretty
yeah.
sweet.
Right, right.
So it's yeah, nothing too crazy. Most of the stuff that we catch, we either most of the time we throw it back or we'll eat. There's another style of fishing that I haven't done that I really want to do. I have a couple of friends that get into it, but it's called flounder gigging, and it's basically you walk around in the shallows with a spear
Yeah.
and a flashlight at night, and you have the flashlight underwater, and you can see the flounder, from the flashlight with its eyes lit up, and then you stab the flounder, take it back with you. So I have a few friends that are into that. I haven't done that yet, but that sounds like a lot of fun.
And it's called flounder gigging.
Flounder gigging.
Okay.
Mhm.
Wow. That's kind of like going after, what are those guys called? They finger, what do they call
Oh,
it?
they
For the
do
catfish.
Catfish?
All
Oh,
right.
yeah.
They're not calling it fingering catfish.
I forget what
What
it's
do they,
called.
yeah, what do they call that?
I can't remember.
Yeah.
Yeah, they stick their hand in the hole and then they bite it and they pull it out.
I know. Yeah. It sounds like Jake is telling us it's called noodling.
Noodling?
Noodling for catfish. Yeah. Yeah, that sounds like a great way to lose. Great way to lose an arm, because apparently these catfish, like, to try to get away, they spin.
Oh, I didn't know
Apparently, so
that.
that, they'll just, you'll stick your hand, you grab this catfish, and then it's just like spinning on your arm. So guys come out and they got these red wheels all up and down their arm.
Wow.
Yeah, and they're like, yeah, there was a lot of fun. I'm like,
Thanks.
different kind of fun, I guess.
Yeah, type
Yeah.
2, I guess.
Yeah, yeah. So okay, but yeah, flounder, going after flounder.
Mhm.
Are they good to eat?
They are very good to eat.
Okay.
Very good.
Gotcha. Huh. Oh. Wow. So it sounds to me as if, like, you're gonna spend your life on the coast, right?
Yeah, I mean,
Come out here to Wyoming.
wherever the
everyone's trying to
Lord
convince
brings
you-
me. Yeah.
Everyone's trying to convince you to move out to Lander, and you're like, nope, too much desert.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I mean, I love it out. I mean, being a geologist, the geology around here is spectacular.
Uh-huh.
And it's nice to visit out here. But yeah, who knows if the Lord calls me somewhere else, then, I'm definitely open to it.
Right. I'm kind of curious though. I mean, you mentioned, being, it sounds like you grew up Catholic.
Mhm.
And you mentioned that that's still very much a part of your life, but you didn't do the small little Catholic Newman Guide thing, right? You went to George Mason, and then you went to University of North Carolina
Mhm.
at Wilmington. So I'm really curious, what was your experience of being, I assume, an active Christian, an active Catholic during that time,
Yeah, I'm more.
in what I assume is a very secular environment
Yeah.
compared to.
So more or less, we actually, fortunately, at George Mason, we had a really big Newman Center.
Right.
We had a chapel that was right off campus. We had a priest, dedicated to that ministry,
Right.
and which helped a lot of my faith formation.
Yeah.
We had about, I'd say like 200 like members or so part of that.
Yeah.
We'd have a 10 p.m. mass for the students on Sundays, and that'd always be filled with the college students. We had Focus there as well, so missionaries helping spread the word. But I was kind of in and out. My parents raised me well to get my butt to mass every Sunday, despite whatever it was going on. So I stuck to that. And it wasn't until I went on two trips, to the Holy Land and to Italy, where
Oh,
everything kind of started to click of, hey, this is the real deal.
uh-huh.
So the priest that was there, at the Newman Center, led those trips, and they were just phenomenal and life changing for me.
Right. Right. Wow. So you went to the Holy Land.
I did.
How old were you?
I was early 20s.
Early 20s.
Yeah.
Okay. So Jerusalem, I assume.
Jerusalem, Nazareth, Bethlehem.
Okay.
Mhm.
Golly. Yeah. Yeah. Israel's crazy, man. I've been a couple times and I have to say it's it's just unlike any other place you'll go
It is.
on earth. So, and you were with a group?
Yes. So
Okay.
we had the priest with us the whole time, and then we had a tour guide that he's been over there a number of times, and it was just a phenomenal trip. Having mass in the Holy Sepulchre, and
Yeah.
it was just in the tomb, and it was
Uh-huh.
just spectacular.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that reminds me of I went with a buddy and we went to mass, Holy Sepulchre. It was like the 5 a.m. mass or something like that.
Mhm.
But it's really funny because you got like five different sects there. You've got these Franciscans, you've got these um, Eastern Orthodox, you got these Russian Orthodox, if I recall correctly, um, and there's a couple of others, and they all kind of like bicker with each other all the time. So
Yeah.
like you'll be in mass, they'll be offering up mass, and then these other monks from this other sect will come and just start saying their prayers, and
Mhm.
they don't give a crap.
Really?
Yeah, oh, absolutely not. No, they'll just come in and they'll start chanting like right over the priest that's like in the middle of the consecration.
Mhm.
It's unhinged. Yeah.
What?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's like five groups of grumpy guys just all sort of all sort of bickering over the same space. That's like not big. I mean, it's like my house by, maybe 3x. I mean, it's not a big space at all.
Mhm.
And it's all being sort of, yeah, there's this like negotiation that is constantly ongoing. So, yeah. But yeah, I'm glad you were able to experience mass in the Holy Sepulchre. So much of the day it's just taken up with
Yeah.
the tourism.
Mhm.
What time of the day did you go?
I mean, so we stayed pretty close, to the Holy Sepulchre. We went in May, and I think we spent like 2 or 3 days in Jerusalem,
Yeah.
and so we could walk there. But we celebrated Mass. It was like midday. It wasn't anything like late evening or morning. It was like whenever they could have us. We
Right.
did it. So
Right.
mhm,
Okay. Gotcha.
yeah.
Wow. Did you run into any um pickpockets or kids with sticks, anything like that?
No,
People
nothing
like
like that. No.
harassing you up on
I mean, a little bit. They're more harassing the priests,
Mm,
but nothing. No, I just following the group.
okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
The reason I ask is that's exactly what happened to my buddy and I.
Oh, wow.
His name was Joey. So granted, I mean, we were it was just the two of us, so that was probably why. But we went up to the Mount of Olives, right? And you go up there and you pray, and then like you go to this little cafe, you get a drink because I mean you're just constantly needing to hydrate.
Yeah.
But anyway, we're on our way back down the hill, back towards the Garden of Gethsemane. You probably remember this walk,
Mhm.
right? And you're just passing through this neighborhood, and I'm with my buddy Joey, and this like mob of kids runs up to us, and at first they ask you for money,
Yeah.
and it wasn't like kids like 12 and 13, right? I mean, it was like they were like 5 years old to like 7. Like these were little kids,
Yeah.
right? So and we're like, no, no, we don't have any money for you. They don't have, and they're like, all right, we kill you. And so they all had sticks and they start beating us
My
like,
goodness.
yeah, like we're just trying to walk, like just trying to move along.
Yeah.
And they start coming up and just whacking us with these sticks. Um, and again, like you're bigger than all of these little kids. I mean, these are like kindergarteners and first graders.
Yeah.
So like, yeah, you could stop them, but like you don't really want to be seen like attacking a 5-year-old
Oh,
in the
yeah.
middle of a foreign country,
Yeah.
right? So we all start like moving faster, right? Like we're just like, we're double timing it down the hill, and these kids, and we think maybe they'll just leave us once we exit their neighborhood. They don't. Like they're sticking with us, and they're just like whacking us and be like, "We kill you, we kill you," and they're like making little pistol fingers at us and like pretending to shoot us. Like, God, these little bunch of little terrorists, you know?
Yeah, yeah.
Gosh. And so and they're just hitting us more and more. And so finally I felt so dumb saying this even afterwards, but I look at my buddy Joey and I say, Joey, run. And we just break out into full out retreat. We just run down the rest of the mountain with these kids like yelling at us, throwing stuff, getting in their last few shots, and we're just tearing it down.
Wow.
I know it was he was like 22, I was like 30. I mean, it was like we could have done something, but you just think, what's gonna happen?
Yeah.
Like front page of the news.
Yeah.
American tourists, fight back. Oh man, it was wild. We should probably take a quick break.
Sure. All right.
Perfect. We're back. All right, awesome. All right, round two.
Do it.
I want to get political. You mentioned a couple of when we were talking about the geological work that you're doing. I mean, you mentioned some of the political issues that your work touches on, and I wanted to pick your brain about those things a little bit more. I mean, it seems to me a conservative might look at what you're doing and say, "Oh my God, I can't believe my tax dollars are going to building beaches and resort areas."
Mhm.
Right? But then someone from the opposite side of the political spectrum might be saying like, "Oh my God, I can't believe that we are altering the environment so that the sea turtles can't get to the water because we built all this extra beach."
Mhm.
I mean, how much have you wrestled with the way that your work, which is basically work in the physical environment,
Mhm.
how much that touches on some of these political things?
Yeah, I mean, I really I look at see what we get awarded from the bills that come out of Congress. I don't
Hmm.
spend a whole lot of time looking at politically of what congressperson's trying to do this and do we get, from an infrastructure bill, how much money do we get? My job is to help beach communities, save their property.
Right,
And whatever what I do to help that is to go out and find sand and to put it on the beach and to make the tourism and all the people that own property happy.
right,
I don't really get into the nuts and bolts of all of the political realm kind of stuff.
right, right.
Mhm.
Okay, so it's outside the scope of your
Exactly. Mhm.
day to day job,
Mhm.
right? Um, what's your going one level higher? I mean, you mentioned global warming with the fact that we're in an ice age. I mean, you're probably in the top 1% of in terms of just education about some environmental issues that are pretty hot button topics.
Mhm.
I mean, what's when you see headlines about global warming trends or climate change or any of these things, what's your advice to laymen like us about how to approach those headlines and some of the pop news, pop science?
Sure. Um, Earth's been around for a really long time,
Yeah.
and the climate has always changed.
Uh-huh.
And so it's nothing new that we're changing in our climate.
Mm.
10,000 years ago, we had a freaking glacier over Lander, Wyoming. All right, so none of this would have had hundreds of feet of ice on top of us.
Right.
And then fast forward to that, it's like, oh my gosh, we're warming.
Yeah.
So to understand that, look, climate's going to change over time.
Mm.
And so are there things, and the earth is there's not an infinite amount of resources that we have,
Yeah.
right? It's not, the oil will eventually go away. The coal will eventually go away at some point later down the road. And so what we have to do is be smart about preserving those resources,
Mm.
and not overusing them. Yes, there's a lot of natural resources that we can use to benefit us, but we also have to think of the future generations.
Mm.
It gets really sticky though, because then it's like, well, how much is too much? How much is like, oh my gosh, we got to cut this off completely, or hey, we can use as much as we want.
Yeah.
There's a line with
Yeah.
that. From what I've seen, just reading the literature and kind of just forming my own opinion of, you got the crazies on the left talking about, global warming, we need to do this, we need to do that. And then the crazies on the right that says doesn't exist. There's a middle point that yes, it does exist. Okay. And we need to come up with a better strategy of how to present that information, but obviously everything is political. One of the most difficult things that we have, that we can't put a um, a pulse on, is how much humans actually affect the changing climate. Like,
Okay.
we can't really put a like quantify. Okay, if you drive your car every day to work, how much is that going to contribute to the climate changing? I would
Okay.
say there's a pretty good correlation with, yes, when we started the Industrial Revolution, that we started emitting these gases in the atmosphere to cause the planet to warm.
Okay.
I believe that is a fact.
Okay.
It's the question of, well, how much is our impact? We don't really understand the impact that we have on the environment. We know we're contributing, we're affecting it in some sort of way. Everything has an effect on the environment. Um, and so how much of it is natural? How much of it is us? And we don't really have an idea of either of those two things, of how much we have as an impact as human beings and the environment itself. We get a big volcanic eruption, that can change the climate drastically. One example that I've heard in the past of when 9/11 happened,
Mm.
when you look up at the sky and you see all the planes flying around, you see the white contrails, right?
Chemtrails.
Or whatever. What did I say? Contrails?
No. They are called
Okay,
chemtrails.
I was like, okay, but
Yeah, no. There's plenty of people who will be like, oh, no. That's, that's a deliberate alteration of the environment, not just a plane flying across the atmosphere.
so you see the white smoke that
Yeah.
comes across.
Yeah.
And so when 9/11 happened, all of the
Everything was
planes,
grounded.
everything was grounded. And even though all the planes were grounded, they're not emitting gases and they're not emitting, harmful stuff that
Yeah.
can cause the temperature to rise and things like that.
Mm.
When you think, okay, we're landing all the planes, there should be, in theory, a cooling happening because you're not emitting those gases in the atmosphere.
Mhm.
But it was the opposite. We actually got warmer during that short period of time because when you emit those white gases, it reflects sunlight.
Mhm.
All right. So it's little things like that where there's so many different factors of where, we don't really have an idea of how much are we causing, how much is it the earth. We get a volcanic eruption that's emitting harmful gases, that's blocking sunlight, or the gases are increasing the average global temperature. It's a really complex issue. You also have scientists that put out these projections of sea level rise or warming and this and that and the other. We have to understand that they're just projections. The weather, where I grew up on the East Coast, the weatherman says it's going to rain. I step outside and I'm like, it's blue skies. He told me it was going to rain today. So they're projections in a computer.
Yeah,
right?
they're models.
They're models, exactly. And we can take the models and be like, okay, this is going in a certain direction. We can try to correct that. But personally, for me, I want to do my best to conserve, reuse what I can, and be smart about, how I go about that, and not be too like, oh my gosh, I have to, use, do crazy things and hoops to preserve the environment. Yeah, there's certain comforts that we have, but I think we can be more responsible in the way that we use our energy. But the technology has gone, really, really in a positive direction in terms of just how much we, like from our automobiles, 15, 20 years ago, the average car on the road was getting what, maybe 20 miles to the gallon, probably less.
Right.
Now
Yeah.
you go out here, and most of the cars are getting well over 20 miles per gallon. So the technology is getting better to where it's like, we don't need to like suppress fossil fuels and go to this green energy. Yeah, let's use green energy if we can use it effectively,
Yeah.
and it's gonna, keep the lights on. But let's not just completely wipe one and then use the other. Let's try to use both.
Yeah. So, I mean, people are trying to use solar, people are trying to use wind. I think I read somewhere that, you know, a, a very mundane, so to speak, a mundane wave that hits the coastline, I mean, could have in it the energy of an atomic bomb. I mean, if you just take this like 10-mile long wave, all the kinetic energy that's captured in it. Again, I don't know how they thought they could measure that or what have you, but certainly there's a lot of energy there.
Mhm.
I mean, is there any way to capture the energy of the tides or of the waves that hit ashore?
Yeah, so there was actually there's something my professor was talking to me about, but they did this experiment with trying to harness energy from the tides. So
Uh-huh.
there's a tide called a tidal bore, and
Hmm.
it's a massive amount of water that rises over a short period of time. So it's a regular tidal cycle, high and low tide,
Hmm.
but you get these tidal bores where it's like we're talking like 20 feet of water
Yeah.
coming in over like a 6 hour period. And so what they did is they tried to install these turbines in the river to capture this movement of water. So like these little spinny things, and for lack of a better word. And when the water was coming in and
Right.
coming
Start
out,
the spinnies.
yeah, so they put these little spinny turbine things in the water.
Mm.
And when they took them out after the first cycle, they were just like it was just so much energy that they couldn't withstand all the force of that water.
Oh,
So when
wow.
you think about it, if you have that amount of energy, how are you able to contain that? It's
Okay.
how can you build something to contain that amount of energy? And it's
Hmm.
the engineering is not there yet. Now we could build smaller scale things to kind of help harness that.
Hmm.
The other thing too about the ocean is if you put anything metal in the ocean, it doesn't last very long. It likes to
Hmm.
rust. So that's the other issue, the upkeep and maintenance.
Hmm.
And then just the efficiency of it. I know the energy's there, but it's building something that's going to be efficient in providing energy. Right now, the most efficient thing for us is fossil fuels. I mean, that's the most efficient thing to
Hmm.
provide us energy to keep our lives going. But people put solar panels on their house and heat their house, cool their house. It's great on a small scale. I think it's really difficult for a large scale operation to go solar or wind. Um,
Because of the variations day to day that you get on a cloudy versus snowy versus rainy versus sunny day,
it's
or
just I think
is it the
the grid, the availability.
Mm.
So if like we were to power all of land, or the amount of land that we would have to use to harness the sun's energy, and then say you get a rainy day or cloudy day,
Mhm.
you're losing that energy that could be powering the town
Mhm.
itself. So green energy is really good for small scale operations.
Mhm.
Um, and you can have a large scale
Right,
operation
the
that
thing that you're trying to power is right there,
exactly.
right? Where you're not forcing, where you don't have to store stuff on a battery, which has
Mhm,
its own limitations,
mhm,
or send the electricity out onto a grid with all the resistance that's in a grid.
mhm.
Yeah, because it just seems like there's so much energy. It's our ability to capture it that's really the funnel point.
It is. Mhm.
No. Huh. Hmm. Okay, so but it sounds like you're saying like there have been attempts to capture, what do they even call it? Like ocean energy or just tidal energy?
Yeah, I mean, it's just a form of energy as I would describe it. Like if you have a dam, they're capturing the flow of that river to
Hmm.
spin the turbines
Right.
to power, whatever they're trying to power or
Hmm.
move to.
Yeah. No, my dad's an engineer. I think he was telling me that the basic crimp on solar is getting it stored. For
Mhm,
some reason, you know, the the time when you have the most of it, right? 10 to 2 in the afternoon is when most people are at work. So most lights in most houses are off, right? So then later in the day from say 8 p.m. to midnight, that's when people want that energy.
mhm.
And I think my dad was saying is like that's the real trouble with solar is the how do you save that energy for 12 hours or 8 hours or whatever the case may be so
Yeah.
that people can use it then. And I think he was saying the crimp on it was the battery technology that we currently have available. So I'd have to go back and ask him about it again and see if I'm remembering correctly.
Yeah, I mean, there's just so many pros and cons with doing the green energy versus the fossil fuels. You think about the waste that comes from, solar panels. They have a life of their own, and then
Hmm.
you got to, dispose of them.
Hmm.
Same with the wind turbines. It's again, it's trying to find that happy medium of
Hmm.
what's most efficient, what's best for your wallet, but not going like too overboard. Hey, we need to eliminate this and eliminate that and just focus on one. I mean, I firmly believe we should be tapping into all types of energy,
Mhm.
not just one or the other.
What's one direction in there that you would like to see more exploration?
I mean, I think sticking with fossil fuels to optimize the use of 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 those products. I
Mm.
mean, I know Shell, Exxon, they're putting a lot of research into trying to optimize machines that take fewer oil and get more energy out of them. I mean, cars is the greatest example over the last, 10, 20 years of how economically we're able to drive further distances on, not a lot of gas. So,
Oh yeah, it's crazy. I mean,
mhm,
what my 93 Ford F-150 gets versus a 2023
mhm,
F-150 can get. I mean, it's nuts.
it is.
It's like it's like 2.5 times better. I mean,
Mhm.
it's
It
crazy
is. Mhm.
how much better it's gotten. I mean,
Well, I was just about to say it's interesting too. So my grandpa was a patent lawyer
uh-huh.
back in Chicago. Pretty wild stuff and stuff he patented. He patented like the aerosol can
Oh, cool.
and the first skid steer loader. Wild stuff. But he also patented a carburetor that a guy made that allowed cars back then to get 60 miles to the gallon, and it was bought out.
Mm-hmm.
And it was interesting. I was like,
Who
huh,
bought it?
an oil company.
An oil company.
Yeah, I was like,
We're
it exists.
we're gonna
Yeah,
save that one. We'll release that in 2040.
I know. It's
When,
like, well, we kind of want it now.
right. When Saudi Arabia decides to cut us off
Yeah.
because the dollars collapse, then we'll think about the 60 mile,
Yeah.
60 gallon. So sorry, 60 miles to the gallon technology being released. Holy cow!
Like,
Oh,
because Tesla also made an engine, an internal combustion engine, like at 65% efficiency as the average 25 for gas.
mm-hmm.
And his principle was just to evaporate the fuel before entering the carburetor.
Uh-huh.
So he just had like a little mist thing on his carburetor, and so just missed it a little more.
This was who's he?
Tesla.
This was Tesla. Okay,
Mhm.
so
Yeah,
engineers working with Musk or under Musk.
Nikolai Tesla.
Oh, Nikolai, the original
Yeah, the
Tesla.
OG.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay, the OG.
So I know it's wild. It's like there's a lot of like simple things that I think if you put them together, you could see exponential energy usage for the better. But
Mm,
I think some people are kind of stuck in the box or framework, or they come up with something that's too revolutionary, and then people are like, "Oh no, not yet."
yeah, yeah, it's
Kind of wild.
right. Right, but it sounds like what you're really advocating for is stewardship, which has been a principle of prudent action, both inside and outside Christianity, is
Mhm.
how do we steward something in an awareness that there's always going to be trade-offs, that there's always going to be inefficiencies, but nonetheless we have to know what's important in life and what's important towards human flourishing, so we can always be moving towards that.
Mhm.
But yeah, Nikolai Tesla, kind of a man of mystery, isn't he? Like,
Hmm.
yeah, I'm always reading little snippets about things he invented or knew about that were 100 years ahead of his time and sort of died with him. He died relatively young, is that right?
Well, he died at 85, but he was
Never
hit.
mind.
He
Forget what
was,
I said.
well, he was hit by a taxi though.
At 85, well, it's not a bad way to go in a certain sense,
Yeah, it was interesting though. I mean, I was looking into it more, and like most of his papers were taken by the FBI when he died.
Hmm.
And then in the 90s, the government requested the FBI to give those back to them.
Right.
And it's interesting, it's like, why all the secrecy, you know? But there was a gentleman he was working with back in 1902 that had a battery that he plugged into the ground and it powered his farm.
Uh-huh.
He called it the Earth battery.
Huh.
It's like, whoa,
What was he doing?
you know, and then there's it's kind of a big rabbit hole, but there was a National Securities Act in the 50s that has since confiscated over 5,000 inventions and like stuff like cars that run on water and stuff like that
Oh my
in the
God.
80s. And it's like, man, what could we actually do?
Right,
What are they
right.
not letting
Right.
us
What are we
find out
sitting on?
about? I know.
I
Crazy.
mean, I don't know, Tom. I mean, forgive me. I'm going to just be the devil's advocate for a minute. But I mean, if some of that technology was extant, I mean, don't you think you would at least be seeing it in military applications, at least? Right? I mean, if tanks could run on water, don't you think we'd have steam tanks? You know what I
Ah,
mean?
cool.
Yeah, yeah.
I don't know.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't
It's
know
something
either.
I just learned about recently, so I still have to piece a lot of it together, but
Right.
at least the rumors are interesting. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. No, I love some of the rumors. It's like the ending of Raiders of the Lost Ark, right? Where they're,
Oh, yeah.
right, the very last scene, they're wheeling it into that warehouse where there's like all these boxes, and you're like, oh my God,
Mhm.
what's in all of those?
Yeah.
Yeah. Huh. Dang. Steve, do you feel like you'll probably be in, in ocean related science for your career, or is there any other areas you're
Yeah, I think ocean related
left unexplored?
sciences would
Okay.
be yeah, the place where I probably finish out my career.
Uh-huh.
I've flirted the idea of taking some engineering classes and doing more engineering related work, but
Hmm.
we'll see if that pathway opens up. But definitely ocean related stuff.
Right, right. I mean, it sounds like there's so much work to be done.
Hmm.
And it sounds like in a certain way you're part of a operation that is you're 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 constantly battling the forces of erosion,
Hmm.
right? I mean, it's never going to be like, okay, we've saved the beaches, we're done,
Yeah,
we can go do something else. Like this is a constant interchange between the forces of nature
mhm.
and
Unless sea level goes down, then
yeah,
yeah,
unless sea level, right, right, unless we get some drastic freezing,
yes,
right,
then
right.
I'll
If
be
the
out of a job.
Yellowstone caldera blows,
Yes,
you're out of a job.
I think we all will be out of a job.
we might all be dead. Wow, that's awesome. Well, man, we really appreciate you coming on here and letting us pick your brain about everything from surfing to coastal nourishing. Is that the is
Beach renourishment.
beach renourishment?
Yeah,
Okay, things that yes, us Wyoming boys, we don't talk about any of this stuff.
Yeah.
We didn't even know it was. But yeah, rest assured that if Tom or I ever get out to do some surfing, it will probably be with you.
yeah,
You'll be the first person we call. It sounds like it would be a great time.
certainly. Happy to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, Steven.
Yeah. No, I appreciate you having time for us today.
You're welcome.